A genius inventor, deep in an experiment, suddenly finds himself unexpectedly disconnected from his own life. To his shock, he is transported back in time and becomes the crown prince of the Joseon dynasty in Korean history. Armed with knowledge from the future, he begins to revolutionize the nation. While other kingdoms still rely on oil lamps, his country is illuminated by electric lights. While others use horses for travel, his nation already boasts trains. And while enemy soldiers march into battle wearing fabric armor, his forces are clad in iron armor and armed with 6-barrel guns, turning every battle into a decisive victory. Follow the journey of a 9-year-old crown prince as he reshapes his kingdom into the most powerful dynasty in history. Our story centers on Kim Jin-ho, a prodigious inventor with an unparalleled ability to create. In middle school, he successfully built a working steam engine. By high school, he was forging iron armor with the precision and skill of a master craftsman from the ancient world. In college, he designed a human-powered plane that ran without fuel. He even crafted a peculiar toy gun that packed more punch than a real firearm, an invention that almost got him arrested by the Royal Army on multiple occasions. But fate had other plans. During a sudden earthquake, Jin-ho accidentally dropped some explosive materials, triggering a disaster. In the blink of an eye, he was sent back in time, awakening in the body of a newborn baby. It didn't take long for Jin-ho to realize that his family in this life was far from ordinary. They were part of the elite upper class. Initially, he thought his parents were just typical nobles, but it didn't take long for him to discover that they were not only incredibly wealthy, but also wielded immense power. His father was the crown prince, the future king, and the 4th ruler of the Oan dynasty in Korean history. Born into privilege, Jin-ho was a true heir to the throne, seemingly destined for greatness. Time flew by, and before he could even grasp it, he was already 4 years old. At this point, the current emperor decided it was time to pass the crown to the crown prince. With his father now ascending to the throne, Jin-ho automatically took on the title of crown prince. Like all royal children, he was expected to start his education early. However, with the mind of someone well over 30, Jin-ho found it incredibly frustrating to be treated as a child and pushed into basic lessons. In an attempt to avoid the grueling routine of studying, Jin-ho devised a clever strategy to use his father to his benefit. History had praised King Sejong the Great as a ruler who valued intellect and placed great emphasis on encouraging innovation and nurturing the brightest minds. Jin-ho's plan was to gather skilled craftsmen, introduce them to critical future knowledge, and earn his father's trust. His ultimate aim? To enjoy a life of luxury, taking advantage of the rewards without lifting a finger. However, he still had to appear dedicated and studious to gain others' trust and manipulate them in his favor. The first step in Jin-ho's scheme was to win over those responsible for his education. These figures would hold influential roles in the court when he matured, making it crucial for him to secure their loyalty. The very next day, as he made his way to his studies, Jin-ho was struck by a nauseating smell. Curious, he scanned his surroundings to identify the source. There in the grass lay a massive pile of dung. Seriously, he thought, did people from ancient times just relieve themselves wherever they felt like it? At that moment, a group of palace maids walked by and bowed as they greeted the crown prince. Just as Jin-ho was about to continue on his way, the smell hit him again. Turning around, he saw that the last maid in the group had stepped directly into the pile, her dress now stained with filth. Jin-ho's temper flared. He immediately realized the source of the mess was a palace maid. Coming from a modern world where hygiene was a priority, he could not tolerate such unsanitary behavior. Determined to prevent this from happening again, Jin-ho decided it was time to confront his teachers. On his way to the meeting, Jin-ho began, "I saw a maid earlier with stains on her dress. It's natural for people to relieve themselves, but it's unacceptable to get it on your clothing." One teacher argued that clothing not only covers the body, but also shows one's social standing, so a little discomfort should be expected. However, Jin-ho, thinking with a modern mindset, immediately countered. Even if a person wears torn clothes, their inner qualities still shine through. Don't you think judging someone based on their clothes is outdated? The teachers were left speechless. Realizing they couldn't respond quickly, they changed the topic. "This issue can't be fixed overnight, Your Highness. Do you have any other questions?" Frustrated by their evasion, Jin-ho pressed on. "I recently read about the invasion of Tsushima Island. It mentioned that everyone, from the nobles to the common folk, had to enlist because the military forces were too weak. Why aren't we training a proper navy? He continued his barrage of questions, leaving the teachers stammering. Also, why didn't we evacuate the civilians from the island? If the fear is that Japanese pirates would occupy the land, wouldn't it be better to move the people to northern Ozen? The more Jinho spoke, the more the teachers began to sweat. They hadn't expected the crown prince to be so knowledgeable about national matters. But no matter how much Jinho questioned them, the elderly scholars insisted these matters were beyond their influence. Hearing this only made Jinho angrier, but there was little he could do. Afterward, the scholars gathered together, amazed at the crown prince's intelligence, especially considering he was only 5 years old. While most children his age were still playing, he was outsmarting his teachers. They agreed that if the crown prince was already so wise, they should teach him more advanced topics. When he became emperor, he would undoubtedly be a wise and capable ruler. Meanwhile, Jinho, still inside the palace, had no idea that his life had just become more difficult. He already hated studying, and now they would make him study even harder. He was still frustrated by the arrogance of the scholars. According to history, the original person who inhabited this body had passed away young from overwork. Jinho had planned to start making his moves when he turned 15, but given the current situation, he realized he needed to act sooner. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye, and now Jinho was 7 years old. He was officially crowned crown prince in front of the entire court. The ancient rituals were excessively complicated, leaving him completely drained. But after years of difficult studies, he had finally earned his position as crown prince. Now he could sit in on imperial discussions with his father and the ministers, where he would be able to present his plans to develop the nation and strengthen its wealth and power. However, the biggest problem was the royal treasury. There weren't enough funds to operate. Despite being crown prince, Jinho was still a 7-year-old child with no real authority. No one would listen to him, but he couldn't just sit back and do nothing. He needed to start small. After writing on a piece of paper, he accidentally smudged ink all over it. "Ah, how annoying," he muttered. No matter how many times he used a brush, he couldn't get used to it. This era is just so inconvenient. Suddenly, an idea struck Jinho. Why not start by addressing the small, daily problems instead of focusing on huge reforms? This was just the beginning. As Jinho walked outside, he saw the blacksmiths hard at work, molding hot iron into various shapes. This was the military supply division, an imperial facility where weapons were forged. The sight and smell of the hot metal filled him with excitement. "I've missed the scent of metal," he thought. "I should visit here more often and get to know the people." A supervising official approached, bowing deeply to greet the crown prince. Jinho smiled and nodded. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks to your hard work, the Joseon fortresses are becoming more robust each day." Official Lee Chong-ho, the overseer of the military supply division, felt honored by the prince's praise. "It is my great honor, Your Highness," he replied respectfully. Jinho got straight to the point, asking, "Who's the most skilled craftsman working with gold and steel here?" Lee Chong-ho seemed surprised by the question. "Gold and steel, Your Highness?" He paused for a moment before answering, "There may be someone who could help with that." After hearing Lee Chong-ho's suggestion, Jinho ordered the skilled blacksmith to be brought in. When the blacksmith saw the crown prince, he immediately knelt and bowed deeply. "I greet Your Highness," he said humbly. Jinho chuckled. "Humble? Don't be modest. You're working in the military supply division, responsible for strengthening Asen's defenses. How could you consider yourself humble?" The blacksmith quickly corrected himself. "Your grace, your boundless wisdom humbles me." Jinho took out a scroll and spread it on the table. "Come closer. I have something I need your help with." He placed a blueprint on the table and asked, "Can you create this?" The blacksmith examined the sketches, a puzzled look crossing his face. "What is this?" he asked. Jinho placed his hand on the table and explained, "This is meant to replace the traditional writing brush." The blacksmith's eyes widened in surprise. "It looks like something that can store ink and release it when writing, but the key feature seems to be controlling the flow of ink with each stroke." Jinho smiled, pleased that the blacksmith understood. "Exactly. Also, I need the nib to have a rounded tip to prevent excess ink from soaking into the paper. Can you also make the slit through which the ink flows as narrow as possible?" The blacksmith thought for a moment. "If I give it my best effort, I think I can make it about 5 mo wide." Jinho quickly worked out the measurements in his head. 5 mo, that is about 3 centimeters, which is about 0.15 millimeters. Do you think you can achieve that by hand? He continued, you'll need to make several of these pens, and they must be finished quickly, not over a month's time. Since the tips will come into contact with water, we'll need to use gold and silver to prevent rust. The pens will be made from thinly hammered sheets. If the molds are correct, we could produce up to 20 pens a day. The blacksmith gestured to the drawing. The main issue is the slit. Jinho nodded thoughtfully. The line needs to be as fine as a single hair when writing, he said, musing to himself. Maybe about the size of a mechanical pencil lead. 0.5 millimeters should be good. After considering the details, the blacksmith said, I can make the slit about 1 GI wide. Jinho asked, how long do you think it will take? The blacksmith replied, if you give me 2 days. Jinho immediately said, I'll give you 3. Bring me your best finished work. The blacksmith eagerly agreed. Understood, Your Highness. 3 days later, the blacksmith returned with the finished products. I've created 5 nibs, each with a different line thickness. Please try them out and let me know which one you prefer. Jinho attached a nib to the pen and carefully dipped it in ink. He made a swift stroke across the paper. The nib produced a fine, elegant line, exceeding his expectations. Jinho smiled, clearly impressed. I love it. You did an amazing job, he said, praising the blacksmith. The blacksmith humbly replied, it's all thanks to your guidance, Your Highness. After testing all the nibs, Jinho placed his order. Make 100 more with this line thickness and keep 10 in pristine condition. The blacksmith nodded immediately. Of course, Your Highness. Jinho added, also, could you engrave plum blossoms on the nib of this gold pen? Without a moment's hesitation, the blacksmith bowed and replied, of course, Your Highness. Yang, full of excitement, inquired, how long will it take? The blacksmith, with unwavering confidence, assured him, only 10 days, Your Highness. Yang, always cautious, replied, I'll grant you 2 extra days, but I expect it to be flawless. I will present this to my father. Gong, the blacksmith, gave a deep bow and pledged, I swear there will be no flaws, Your Highness. Yang, with one final request, added, by the way, please keep this project a secret until I introduce it to my father. Gong quickly responded, as you wish, Your Highness. With their conversation concluded, Yang swiftly departed. From a distance, Li Chong-ho, who had been watching, remarked, His Highness is remarkably mature for his age. Gong, agreeing, replied, I've heard he's only just turned 8, but the way he speaks and carries himself, it's as if he's 30. Li Chong-ho, turning to him, asked, putting that aside, you've probably realized something by now? Isn't it wonderful to be the finest craftsman in Asen? It turned out that Gong had received a special certificate of recognition, personally given to him by Crown Prince Yang. Gong cherished it greatly and said, I'll need to find a skilled carpenter to make the perfect frame for this. It's truly a family heirloom in the making. Meanwhile, the nibs Yang had requested were finally completed, adorned with intricate plum blossom engravings. When Emperor Youngnan tested the pen, he was astounded. This is an extraordinary tool. 10 out of 10, he exclaimed. In the 3rd year of Sai Yung's reign, the crown prince proudly presented the golden pen to the emperor. After trying it himself, the emperor was unable to contain his praise. The wrist and arm feel so comfortable while writing with this pen. Even when writing quickly, it maintains its beauty. Truly, the crown prince has created something remarkable. Yang humbly responded, You are too kind, father. The emperor, pleased, declared, The historians must record the remarkable achievement of the crown prince today. The historian, bowing respectfully, responded, As you command, Your Majesty. Emperor Young Neon looked at the pen for a long moment. You've done something truly extraordinary, Crown Prince, he said, noticing something special. Is this a plum blossom? He asked. Yang replied quickly. Yes, it's engraved on the nib as the royal family symbol. The emperor, filled with pride, responded, Excellent. But how did you come up with the idea for this invention? The emperor, eager to know, asked the crown prince to explain his reasoning. Yang paused, thinking carefully, then responded with cleverness. One day, when father was dipping his brush into the ink, I noticed something strange. The ink seemed to be absorbed into the bristles of the brush. Normally, water flows downward, but here the ink moved upward, defying what was expected. It fascinated me, and so I decided to create this. The emperor, impressed with his son's insight, said, Many have used brushes, but none have observed it in the way you did. This is truly an example of learning through observation. Hiang, grateful for the praise, boldly replied, "Thank you for your kind words, father. I have one request." "Speak your mind," the emperor replied. Hiang turned to the servant and called, "Eunuch, bring them here." The servant entered, carrying a mysterious box. "Father," Hiang said, turning to the emperor, "I request that these golden pens be given to the historians and ministers of the court." The emperor, intrigued, asked, "All of these pens?" Hiang explained, "The ministers and officials who write quickly would benefit from them. The historians who work tirelessly without rest deserve something to ease their workload. I thought this might be helpful to them." Everyone present was taken by surprise. No one had ever thought to show such empathy toward the historians. The emperor, turning to the ministers, asked, "What do you think of the crown prince's idea?" The ministers, all in agreement, said, "We believe the crown prince is right. It's truly remarkable for someone so young to think about the well-being of his officials. It's a beautiful gesture." Finally, the emperor gave his approval. "Distribute the golden pens to the historians and court officials," he ordered. The servants quickly obeyed. Throughout the ceremony, the emperor smiled with joy, and the ministers shared in his happiness. "His Highness, the Crown Prince, truly has a deep and thoughtful mind," they remarked. Hiang smiled contentedly. Not long after the golden pen, Hiang had created set a new trend in Joseon. In the third year of Sejong's reign, after presenting the pen to the emperor, Hiang's invention was praised as a remarkable tool. The emperor, deeply impressed by the crown prince's brilliance, ordered the pens to be distributed to those in need. This ensured Hiang's thoughtful gesture would benefit the entire court. The reaction was overwhelming. Court officials and ministers were captivated by the new invention, and the excitement surrounding it spread like wildfire. "Have you tried the golden nib pen that the crown prince invented?" one official asked. "I have, and it's truly remarkable. It became incredibly popular because it made writing official documents so much easier." Additionally, Hiang had created a portable writing board for the generals. This allowed them to issue urgent orders comfortably wherever they were. The writing board was the perfect match for the golden nib pen, and everyone who used it couldn't stop praising it. "This is incredible," they exclaimed. Emperor Yuni was very pleased and ordered that both items be mass-produced. He then had them distributed to the generals alongside the golden nib pens. The golden nib pen that Hiang had invented brought about significant changes in the kingdom. A few days later, during a court session, a minister spoke to the emperor. "There's been an unfortunate incident in the market." "An unfortunate incident?" the emperor asked. "Speak," he commanded. "There are rumors that counterfeit golden nib pens are being sold everywhere," the minister explained. "How dare they forge such a valuable item, especially one that bears the royal symbol?" "This is an outrage," the emperor exclaimed. "The punishment must be severe." The officials all agreed in unison. "We urge your majesty to punish them strictly." The emperor, remembering Hiang, said, "I believe we should consult the crown prince. After all, he is the one who invented the golden nib pen." The eunuch immediately called out, "Summon the crown prince." A short time later, Hiang arrived. "Father, you called for me?" The emperor got straight to the point. "The ministers have reported that counterfeit golden nib pens are being sold. They must be severely punished. I'd like to hear your thoughts, my son." Hiang bowed and replied, "Yes, father." He furrowed his brow in thought. Everyone's eyes were on him, waiting to hear the young prince's response, admiring how thoughtful he seemed. A few moments later, Hiang finally spoke. "Father, may I take charge of this issue?" Before anyone knew it, a month had passed, and the crown prince made his move. Hiang calmly entered the Ministry of Revenue. At his arrival, every official quickly knelt and bowed with the utmost respect. "Your Highness, we honor the crown prince," they said in unison. Hiang looked at them with a calm demeanor. "So, do you understand why I'm here?" He held up a pen. One official's face turned ashen at the sight of it, and no one dared to lift their gaze. "None of us would allow our guilds to be part of such a disgraceful act," one official nervously replied. "My guild would never be involved in something like this," another added in defense. Hiang observed them briefly, then replied, "I'm not here to point fingers at you. Stand up." Cold sweat dripped down their faces, and their hands trembled. Hiang slammed his hand on the table, his voice lowering in authority. "Don't make me repeat myself. What do you think you're doing? Stand up immediately." The officials stood shakily, regaining their composure as Hiang took his seat exuding confidence. Let me be clear. I am ready to award the production of both golden nib pens and ordinary pens to one of your guilds. However, those producing the golden nib pens will be required to give 20% of their earnings to the royal court. Furthermore, the retail price of the pens must not exceed 60% more than what it costs to produce them. An official, clearly uncomfortable, hesitated before speaking up. Your Highness, if I may, there's an issue. He carefully explained his point. While a 60% markup seems generous, factoring in the wages of the workers and the sellers, we'd only be left with a 30% profit. With the 20% taken by the court, that leaves us with just 10%. At that moment, Hiang's expression darkened. He slammed his hand onto the table in frustration. Are you lying to me? The official fell silent, realizing his mistake. Hiang pointed at him and barked. I said 20% of the 30% profit. That means you'd only keep about 6%, not 10%. Take this dishonest fool out of my sight and strip his guild of their bidding rights. The man froze, stammering for a reply, but two soldiers swiftly dragged him away, ignoring his desperate pleas. Please, Your Highness, have mercy. One of the officials glanced nervously toward Hiang, but no one dared to speak as the room became tense with silence. Hiang's tone remained firm. Both my father and I agree that the prosperity of merchants and commoners is vital. No one can thrive alone. Everyone needs assistance in life. He suddenly stood up, his voice rising with authority. However, if any of you dare to deceive like he did, you will be seen as nothing more than trash. Understand, all the officials bowed deeply and responded together. We will remember, Your Highness. With Hiang's position now made clear, the bidding process for the golden nib pen moved forward without further deception. Hiang called for the eunuch to meet him privately. A sly grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. You did well, eunuch. I wouldn't dare, Your Highness, the eunuch replied, his brow furrowed. But if I may ask, why did you take such drastic measures? Hiang let out a quiet sigh. You know, I'm still young and lacking in experience. I don't have many other options. The eunuch nodded in understanding. Indeed, Your Highness. Well, if you'll permit me, I'll take my leave now. Go ahead, Hiang replied, his heart filled with satisfaction. Good, everything's going smoothly. Just keep this up. But then, a sudden interruption. Your Majesty, I, Grand Minister Su-un, must report something of great importance. This was the first time Hiang had encountered such political maneuvering. With a determined gaze, he turned toward the man. Swam spoke again, his words final. We cannot continue with the Crown Prince's plan, Your Majesty. Since Hiang's reincarnation, he had been showered with endless praise and laughter, particularly as the royal treasury flourished. Everyone was overjoyed by the financial success that followed the introduction of golden nib pens. The economic situation had steadily improved, generating revenue like never before. Thanks to this, King Sa Jiang and the ministers began to pay closer attention to the benefits of trade. The emperor praised Hiang, saying, The crown prince has truly done something remarkable. However, those less fond of the prince began meeting in secrecy. A small group of conspirators huddled together, discussing in hushed tones. How can a court turn into a marketplace? The merchants will become the lowest class in society. The emperor and the officials are showing far too much favoritism toward them, one man said, stroking his beard. This all originates from the crown prince. We must act swiftly to reveal this to the emperor, or else things will continue to spiral downward. The group agreed. No matter how clever the crown prince is, he is still just a child. It is a grave error to allow a child to decide such important matters. But before they could carry their complaints to the emperor's father, Grand King Tijiang, passed away on the 10th of May during the 4th year of Siam's reign. Grand King Tijiang died at the age of 56, forcing the conspirators to delay their plans. It seems we'll have to wait for a better opportunity, one said, and the others reluctantly agreed. Meanwhile, Hiang was overwhelmed with work. Day and night, he buried himself in book after book. So, the books from Europe in this era come here. Through China, he mused. Hands on his hips and a confident expression on his face, he added, Hopefully, this will help me with the source of my inspiration. If I claim these ideas as my own, they'll grow suspicious. Hiang's face darkened. I need to figure out how to deceive them. Everything was proceeding as planned. During the formal court presentation, Hiang spoke with clarity and logic. Therefore, I believe it would be far more practical if we adopted these Indian numerals, or, as the Westerners call them, Arabic numerals for use in our country. The ministers reacted. Minister of Revenue Kim Young spoke up first. After careful thought, I believe these Indian numerals would indeed be useful for representing numbers. Minister of Rights Hyad Du also agreed, saying, I share that opinion. The emperor quickly made his decision. With the support of these two important ministries, we will allow the use of Indian numerals starting next month. If the results are favorable, we will implement them nationwide. Everyone responded in unison. We obey your majesty. As the next petition was read, the emperor paused. I think the crown prince should hear this. Yang, confused, replied, Yes, father. The emperor rubbed his temples, looking weary. The emperor of the Ming has sent a letter. Emperor Jungle is very pleased with the golden nib pens and has requested that we send an additional 10,000 as tribute. Yang knew the royal treasury was struggling and immediately began formulating a plan. A sudden idea struck him. Father, what if the court were to establish its own guild? At the mention of the word guild, everyone was shocked. How could that be? Minister of Rights Heen protested. The emperor motioned for him to be quiet. The crown prince has more to say. Continue, he urged. Yang began explaining in detail. Since the emperor of the Ming has requested more pens, it's clear they are in high demand in the Ming dynasty. With its vast territory and large population, the number of literate people there must be far greater than in our nation. If we collaborate with merchants to handle the production of golden nib pens, we could easily meet the Ming dynasty's demands, and then some. The emperor listened thoughtfully. Minister Kim Jong was already calculating in his head. If we base our projections on that, both the emperor and I can expect considerable profit. Yang continued. We can also arrange for merchants to accompany our diplomatic missions to the Ming dynasty. In return, the merchants would only need to cover their lodging expenses. Minister Swam growled in protest. No, we cannot proceed with the crown prince's plan. He presented his concerns. While the crown prince's plan would certainly bring wealth to the court, if we grow too rich, the people may become self-indulgent, leading to luxury and excess. This could result in tyranny, and the royal family's power would be compromised. Another official spoke up. I, the Minister of Rights, agree with Minister Swam. How could we allow such lowly merchants to accompany a diplomatic mission to the Emperor of Ming? It would tarnish the honor of our nation. Yosin, Yang, determined, asked, Minister Swam, do you think we should continue to live in poverty and find joy in it, as some claim a king should have? Have you seen any commoners who truly wish to live in poverty and remain virtuous? They suffer from droughts, starvation, and freezing winters. Who would praise their virtue with authority? Yang continued. Even a noble would do anything to feed his starving child. A king should be no different. A king is the father of his people. Shouldn't a father act to care for his children? The emperor, visibly moved, declared, My son speaks wisely. No one dared to challenge Yang further, and the scribes quickly recorded the emperor's words. With the court in silence, the young prince passionately continued, For the prosperity of our kingdom and to save our people, we must take action. The emperor, once again impressed, praised his son, My son speaks wisely. The emperor took a brief moment to steady himself. Yang, noticing this, pressed on as the court remained in expectant silence. Go on, the emperor urged. Yes, father, Yang responded. The ministers and nobles beyond the palace walls can endure hunger because they understand both the reason and necessity behind it. However, the common people do not possess such knowledge, nor do they comprehend how to withstand such suffering. If we truly wish to educate them, shouldn't we first ease their burdens by lessening their hunger? The emperor slammed his hand onto the table precisely. The entire court watched in stunned silence. Yang thought to himself, Father's growing too agitated. Perhaps I should end things here for today. Yet he continued, Throughout history, it has been said that the will of the people reflects the will of heaven. Even if we as rulers uphold virtue, what would the gods think if our people remain in despair? Moreover, it is often said, Man proposes, but heaven disposes. If we have done all that is within our power, should we not then wait to see how the heavens respond? Yet whenever droughts or plagues befall the land, ministers are quick to claim that it is due to the emperor's waning virtue, insisting that preserving virtue takes precedence over all else. Is that not a contradiction? Yang then turned to the court. Many among you have served since before this dynasty came to be. Then tell me, why was King Tao never accused of losing virtue when he established this very kingdom while still a subject of Goryeo? Or what of my grandfather, King Tejong? Was he devoid of virtue for raising his sword against his own brothers? And what of my father? Is he lacking in virtue because he ascended the throne instead of his elder brother, the rightful heir? Grand Minister Swam immediately interjected, his voice urgent. Your Highness, that is not what we meant. He turned to the Emperor in desperation. Your Majesty, we have never entertained such treasonous thoughts. We beg your Majesty for mercy. The ministers followed in unison. Please, your Majesty, grant us mercy. The Emperor, his expression firm yet composed, finally spoke. The Crown Prince's words may have been severe, but I trust the ministers will not take offense. Yang, mind your words in the future. Yes, Father, I will be more careful, Yang responded swiftly. The Emperor then addressed the court. I want you all to understand, I too believe that ensuring the well-being of the people is of utmost importance. Furthermore, the tribute to the Ming Emperor will proceed according to the Crown Prince's proposal. The officials lowered their heads in compliance, as your Majesty commands. The Emperor turned back to Yang. Do you have anything more to add? Yang immediately replied. Rather than simply distributing food as charity, I believe it would be wiser to provide sustenance in exchange for labor, Father. The Emperor, intrigued, raised an eyebrow. You propose paying them? Yang elaborated. Droughts are not solely caused by a lack of rainfall. Our limited irrigation systems and neglected reservoirs also play a significant role. If we wish to prevent future disasters, we must construct water storage facilities in every town and restore the ones that have fallen into disrepair. By enlisting the people for this task and compensating them with food, we can address both hunger and infrastructure at once. Would this not be solving two problems at once? He turned toward the ministers. What do you all think? The court officials, after a brief murmur of agreement, responded unanimously. Your Highness, this is an excellent proposal. The Emperor gave a firm nod before issuing his command. Crown Prince, return to the palace. Yang bowed deeply. Yes, Father. Just as he was about to leave, the Emperor seemed to recall something. And do not forget, you must prepare to take part in state discussions once the ancestral rites have concluded. Thank you, Father, for granting your inexperienced son the opportunity to partake in such matters, Yang replied before turning to depart. Rising from his seat, the Emperor declared, Court is adjourned. You are all dismissed. As your Majesty commands, the court echoed. Yet, before anyone could move, the Emperor's voice suddenly deepened, taking on a graver tone. One more thing, he added. Perhaps it is time I truly consider something. Tell me, what do you all honestly think of this dynasty? The ministers were gripped by fear. Your Majesty, we would never even dream of betraying you. They pleaded desperately. Please have mercy. The Emperor's expression turned cold. Go back to your duties, he commanded. Mercy, your Majesty. They echoed as they hurriedly left the hall. Outside, murmurs spread among the officials. One misstep, and disaster could strike, one whispered. He isn't just King Tio's descendant. His lineage is deeply tied to the previous rulers as well. Grand Minister Sum shot them a stern look. Enough of that nonsense. If you value your positions, you'll be careful with what you say. Another official sighed. I can't help but wonder, is this truly the path our nation is headed down? The others exchanged cautious glances before one warned. You should know by now, careless words can lead to ruin. Some exhaled slowly. We made a grave error today. We dismissed the Crown Prince because of his youth, but he has proven to be far more formidable than we expected. One minister hesitated before asking, Then what do we do now? Some's expression darkened. If it comes to it, we may have no choice but to submit a formal resignation. The suggestion stunned the others. Resign. Some folded his arms. Our role is to guide the ruler, ensuring he stays on the right path. Even ancient texts say that a wise leader listens to the voice of his people. We must make sure the emperor remains wise. His tone carried a weight of unspoken intent. When King Se-young's order was proclaimed, the Ministry of Revenue set to work crafting golden nib pens intended as tribute for Emperor Jungle. However, an issue soon arose. The emperor's expression darkened. What do you mean they won't meet the deadline? A court official bowed low. Your Majesty, I beg your forgiveness. but the merchant guild responsible for the pins has informed us that they cannot produce the required amount in time. Jinho had anticipated this. Given the current state of Josian's workshops, meeting such a demand within the given time frame was unrealistic. After a brief pause, he addressed his father. "Your Majesty, I need to clarify something. May I summon the leader of the merchant guild?" Some immediately protested. "This is unacceptable. A mere merchant has no place in affairs of the state." The emperor remained composed. "Grand Secretary, you knew exactly how I would respond, yet you still chose to interrupt me, didn't you?" Realizing his mistake, some hesitated. "Your Majesty, The emperor continued, his tone unwavering. "I acknowledge your loyalty, but instead of dismissing every proposal outright, why not present an actual alternative?" Lowering his head, some murmured, "I seek your Majesty's pardon." The emperor dismissed the matter. "Summon the merchant at once." Not long after, the guild's representative was brought before the court and knelt. "Your humble servant greets your Majesty." The emperor gestured toward Jinho. "The crown prince has a question for you. Answer honestly." "Yes, your Majesty," the merchant responded. Jinho's gaze was steady. "I understand that your guild is unable to fulfill the order on time. What is the reason for this delay?" The merchant bowed his head slightly. "Golden nib pins require meticulous craftsmanship. Each piece must be crafted with precision and care. Even if we work faster, there are limits to how many can be made within the time frame." Jinho considered this. "So the entire process relies on a single artisan for each pin?" "That is correct, Your Highness," the merchant confirmed. "A skilled craftsman must handle each one individually." After a moment's thought, Jinho turned to his father. "Your Majesty, I believe I have a solution. However, I will need to speak with the artisans directly." Sun reacted immediately, his voice rising in protest. "Your Majesty, first a merchant. Now the prince wishes to summon mere craftsmen to the royal court. This cannot be allowed." The emperor's patience wore thin. "Grand Secretary, silence yourself. Why should I not summon them when this matter concerns the kingdom itself?" Sun, still displeased, attempted to argue. "Your Majesty, But the emperor had heard enough. "If you persist in arguing, I may begin to doubt your loyalty," the emperor warned, his voice heavy with authority. The chamber fell into an uneasy silence. No one dared to challenge him further. With a firm gesture, the emperor commanded, "Summon the craftsmen at once." When the artisans arrived, Jinho addressed them directly. "I've been told that each of you is responsible for crafting an entire golden nib pin from start to finish. Is that correct?" The craftsmen, kneeling, responded in unison, "Yes, Your Highness." Jinho gave a thoughtful nod before continuing. "I have a proposal. Rather than each craftsman handling the entire process alone, why not divide the labor? One person could shape the nib, another could refine it, and a third could engrave the final details. Would this method improve efficiency?" The craftsmen exchanged startled glances before one of them hesitantly replied, "It may be possible, Your Highness. We would need time to adjust, but once accustomed to the process, we should be able to produce the pins much faster than before." Jinho smiled. "This concept is called division of labor. When tasks are shared among many, production increases significantly." The emperor, clearly impressed, nodded approvingly. "That logic is sound. We shall look forward to seeing the results. You may return to your work." After the artisans had departed, the emperor turned to his son. "Division of labor to boost productivity? How did you conceive such an ingenious idea?" Crown Prince Jinho hesitated for a moment before answering. "I observed the kitchen staff, the assistants, and maids following the head chef's instructions, each performing specific tasks instead of cooking a dish alone. That observation led me to this conclusion." The emperor let out a hearty laugh. "A brilliant mind indeed, to derive such wisdom from everyday occurrences. Truly extraordinary. Ministers, what are your thoughts?" The officials bowed and responded in agreement. "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince is exceptionally wise." However, Swam, unwilling to conform, voiced his dissent. "Your Majesty, I fear the Crown Prince is wasting his intellect on insignificant matters. His sharp mind would be better directed towards studying the teachings of the sages." The emperor's expression darkened. "Why do you dismiss deep thought and insight as trivial? Did the great scholars not also reflect on matters that benefit the nation and its people? Or is it that you, Grand Secretary, refuse to acknowledge wisdom unless it comes from your beloved classics?" Swam, realizing he had overstepped, quickly bowed. "I only wish for the crown prince's growth, your majesty." The emperor's patience wore thin. "Is this not exactly what the crown prince mentioned the other day? That you believe my rule and that of my ancestors unworthy? Is that why you dare to speak such nonsense?" Panic flashed across Swam's face as he stammered. "Your majesty, I would never entertain such disloyal thoughts. Please, I beg you to understand my intentions." Another minister, watching the exchange in silence, mused to himself. Swam may have been narrow-minded, but to suppress dissent so harshly, it is unwise for a ruler to silence opposing voices, no matter how talented his heir may be. Jinho, too, observed his father carefully. He's revealing his true nature again. Later, when Jinho returned to the Eastern Palace, he shut the door behind him and exhaled deeply. That was intense. If I hadn't thought of the division of labor in time, I wonder how things would have unfolded. He sat in contemplation. Come to think of it, division of labor doesn't even exist in this era. Though Adam Smith later formalized it, it had been practiced long before him. Historically, industrialized labor systems were shaped through agreements between absolute monarchs and market policies. But what about Rome? Though it claims to be an absolute monarchy, in reality, it is a battleground between the king striving to uphold his authority and officials pushing for a republican system. Meanwhile, the common people yearned for a semi-republican government. If a ruler truly prioritizes his people over his officials, he can secure their support, thereby consolidating real power. Success won't come overnight. I must build this foundation piece by piece, ensuring my father's authority extends to the most remote corners of the kingdom. And for that, I need wealth. Determined, Jinho stood. The first step is clear. I will fill the treasury. Resolute in his decision, the crown prince left the Eastern Palace. He made his way toward the main hall. The emperor, taken aback, inquired, "What brings you here?" The crown prince respectfully answered, "I need to discuss something regarding the envoy preparing to journey to the Ming dynasty. There is a matter we must have the Ming emperor verify." Those present exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. What was the crown prince plotting this time? Jinho calmly stated, "This concerns the envoy being dispatched to Ming. We need to secure confirmation from their emperor regarding an important issue." The emperor, intrigued, asked, "What exactly is on your mind now?" The crown prince offered a measured smile, his thoughts carefully calculating his next move. The first step to enriching the treasury was securing a monopoly on the trade of gold-tipped pens. I needed to ensure that Rowan's merchant alone would have the right to sell these prize pens within Ming's vast market. He explained, "The Emperor of Ming continues to request more of these pens from us, which indicates their immense value. Since their empire is significantly larger than ours, their demand is naturally much greater." He continued, "Additionally, every time the Ming envoys arrive, they demand an excessive amount of tribute. We must request an official decree to regulate their demands." At this, Minister Swam, clearly unsettled, interrupted, "Your Highness, that is unthinkable. The Ming dynasty considers Ran a subordinate state, a vassal. Questioning the demands of its sovereign would be a grave affront." The crown prince, unfazed, challenged, "And why would it be offensive? Does being the larger nation give them the right to exploit smaller ones?" Swam countered, "That is not the issue. If we suddenly reduce the tribute they are accustomed to receiving, it could provoke serious repercussions." Jinho, growing irritated with Swam's constant resistance, thought, "This old man never fails to oppose me." Aloud, he said, "Do you even realize where all this tribute comes from? It is taken from the very people of our land, the result of their labor and sacrifice. Furthermore, the Ming dynasty's demands continue to increase, which means our own people's resources are diminishing. If this trend continues, even our treasury will suffer. Should we not address this crisis before it escalates?" Swam remained steadfast. "Your Highness, you still lack experience in governing state affairs. The envoys we deal with are not mere officials. They are eunuchs, those closest to the Emperor of Ming. If they speak poorly of us, we could be placing Ran in grave danger." The crown prince's patience wore thin. "Do you truly believe the Ming Emperor is so easily swayed by mere words?" Swam hesitated. "That is not what I mean. I fear that, due to your youth, you may make rash decisions that bring significant harm in pursuit of minor benefits." The crown prince's expression darkened. "What does my age have to do with this? And did you not just claim that we are suffering major losses for insignificant gains? Every time the Ming envoys arrive, Their tribute demands clog our roads for miles. Is that not wealth being stripped from our people and our treasury? He pressed on. Master Yoshin, the great sage, once taught that a true official prioritizes the well-being of the people above all else. Yet here you stand, advocating submission to these envoys as if we are their servants. What does that make you then? Swam hastily tried to explain. Your Highness, you are exaggerating. We are not submitting. The Crown Prince cut him off sharply. I have not finished speaking. He continued. Menus once taught that a virtuous individual, even while surrounded by wealth, remains compassionate. Even when seated at the highest ranks, they uphold their integrity, steadfastly walking the path of righteousness. Now tell me, does showering these eunuchs with gifts and false praise align with any of these principles? If not, how can you still call yourselves honorable men? Then, without hesitation, the Crown Prince dropped to his knees, his voice filled with conviction. Father, I beg you, let me lead the envoy this time. I will personally appeal to the Emperor of Ming and do everything in my power to put an end to this unjust tradition. Please grant me your permission. He continued. It is true that I am still young, only 9 years old, but my resolve stands taller than the highest mountain. The Emperor rubbed his temples, exhaling slowly before addressing his son. The journey to Beijing is long and fraught with hardship. The Crown Prince met his gaze and replied firmly. Rand stand at a crossroads, a time of both crisis and opportunity. If we act wisely, we can build a foundation that will support 1,000 years of prosperity. But if we hesitate, we will remain nothing more than a small and isolated nation. I ask you, Father, to consider my words. The Emperor let out a deep sigh. Return to your palace, Crown Prince. Eunuchs, escort him back to his chambers. He is too agitated. See that he calms himself. Desperation flashed across the young prince's face as he cried out, Father, please! I implore you, allow me to go. Back in the Eastern Palace, frustration boiled over. The Crown Prince stormed into the hall and shouted, Everyone leave now. The attendants scattered. He collapsed into a chair, his hands clenched into fists. Damn it, I'll let my emotions get the better of me. He sat there in silence, lost in thought, before muttering bitterly, That insufferable Swam. He looks down on me because of my age, doesn't he? He's been standing in my way since the last time. Well, I refuse to let this go unanswered. Just wait and see, you wretches. Then he called out, Eunuch, prepare for my departure to the Ming dynasty. The startled eunuch hesitated. Your Highness, what? Why so suddenly? I said prepare my belongings now. Meanwhile, in the main hall, ministers debated among themselves. Your Majesty, we cannot allow the Crown Prince to act so recklessly. Please consider our concerns. The Emperor let out a weary sigh. Tell me, do you know how much sleep that child gets each night? Never more than 6 hours. He is only 9 years old, yet his mind is constantly occupied with ways to strengthen the nation. And all you ever do is reject his ideas again and again. The officials lowered their heads in shame. Your Majesty, we are at fault. We deserve punishment. Just then, a servant burst into the hall. Your Majesty, an urgent matter. The Emperor frowned. What is it? The servant hesitated before replying. The Crown Prince, he is preparing to leave. A stunned silence filled the chamber. What? One of the ministers gasped. Where is he going? Alarmed, the Emperor turned to the servant. Where is that boy heading? A eunuch stepped forward and answered cautiously. It appears His Highness is planning to depart for the Ming dynasty immediately. He said he cannot afford to waste even a single moment if he truly cares for the nation and its people. The Emperor's expression darkened, his patience snapping. Slamming his hand against the table, he roared, That reckless child! How dare he define me like this? Fuming with anger, the Emperor stormed toward the Crown Prince's quarters. As he neared, he spotted 2 eunuchs leaving the chamber and bellowed, You too! Stop right there! The startled eunuchs quickly turned and bowed deeply. Your Majesty, we pay our respects. The Emperor narrowed his eyes. Aren't you both assigned to the East Palace? Where are you headed? One eunuch hesitated briefly before replying. Your Majesty, we are on our way to the Office of Records. Suspicious, the Emperor pressed further. And for what purpose? The eunuch faltered, but eventually muttered. We were instructed to document all the gifts sent to the Ming envoys ever since the late King Zhou's reign. Hearing this, the Emperor's fury exploded. His voice thundered. That audacious brat! Meanwhile, in the Empress's chambers, a servant rushed in, breathless. "Your Majesty," he gasped, "a grave matter has arisen." The Empress turned sharply. "What's with all this shouting?" Panting, the servant blurted out, "The Crown Prince is preparing to leave for the Ming Empire." The Empress's face went pale. "He's planning to go to the Ming Empire? Does he think it's as simple as a casual outing? Why is he doing this?" The servant explained. "The prince insists it's to put an end to the Ming envoy's excessive demands for tribute." The Ministry of Justice tried to reason with him, but he refused to listen. He declared that if no one else will act, he will go himself. After a brief pause, the servant added in a hushed tone, "His Majesty is already on his way to the East Palace." The Empress's heart pounded with anxiety. Without wasting another moment, she hastily left her quarters and rushed toward the palace, her mind racing. "What in the world are you thinking, my son?" The servants, startled by her urgency, hurried after her, calling out, "Your Majesty, please slow down." At the East Palace, the Emperor stormed inside, his temper boiling over. Pointing a trembling finger at his son, he roared, "You reckless child! What madness is this?" Standing his ground, the Crown Prince met his father's gaze and declared, "This is not recklessness, father. It is my duty." Outside, court officials stood in stiff silence, not daring to intervene. The Emperor's wrath echoed through the hall. "You're only 9 years old," he thundered. "Do you even understand the gravity of your actions?" The Crown Prince remained steadfast. Age does not determine one's resolve. People use youth as an excuse to avoid responsibility, but I will not. Growing even more furious, the Emperor demanded, "And what makes you think you can shoulder this burden alone?" At that moment, the Empress burst into the hall, breathless. "Your Majesty, please wait." The Crown Prince clenched his fists. "If the Emperor is the father of the nation, then I wish to be its elder brother. When the envoys come, the people suffer. If I stand by and do nothing, what kind of elder brother would I be?" His words, though passionate, only fueled the Emperor's anger. "You foolish boy," he growled, gritting his teeth. "You dare defy me." His patience snapped. "Steward, bring the whip and the punishment bench." A wave of shock rippled through the hall. The Empress gasped, horror-stricken. The officials outside stiffened, their faces filled with unease. The Empress rushed forward. "Your Majesty, please reconsider. He's just a child." The Emperor's expression remained unyielding. "And that is exactly why he must be disciplined. Empress, do not meddle in this matter." He motioned to the eunuchs. "Take the Empress out." Desperation filled her voice. "Your Majesty, have mercy." Before the eunuchs could act, the first lash struck. The whip cracked against the Crown Prince's legs, leaving a stinging, red mark with each strike. The Emperor roared, "Your first mistake, being arrogant beyond your years. Your second, showing no respect to those who serve you." But despite his tender age, the Crown Prince did not shed a tear. He clenched his teeth and bore the pain in silence. By now, the Crown Prince's legs were covered in red welts from the lashes. But the Emperor showed no mercy. He continued striking, saying, "Your third mistake is defying your father's orders. Reflect on your actions today and ensure this never happens again." Outside, the Empress had cried until she could shed no more tears, while the minister stood uneasily, anxiously awaiting the outcome. At last, the doors opened, and the Emperor, still breathing heavily from his fury, stepped out. He ordered, "Summon the royal physicians to tend to the Crown Prince." The officials responded in unison, "Yes, Your Majesty." As the Emperor passed, he noticed the Empress still sobbing and instructed her, "Care for the Crown Prince." He then glanced at the ministers and added, "You are all more petty than a child." One minister, unable to restrain himself, muttered, "How could the Crown Prince act this way?" Another, noticing the Empress nearby, quickly warned, "Be quiet, the Empress will hear you." With anger in her voice, the Empress turned toward the ministers. "Why couldn't you think as wisely as the child? Look at what's happened now. I will never forget today." The ministers lowered their heads, acknowledging their failure. "We are to blame. We deserve punishment." In the Crown Prince's chambers, the Empress continued to scold him, her frustration clear. She slapped his legs repeatedly. "You troublesome child. Why do you always make me worry like this? Can't you behave?" The Crown Prince cried out, "Mother, it hurts." He lay face down, thinking to himself, "No matter the life, it seems my legs always bear the brunt of things." After a while, the Crown Prince was surprised when he felt his mother stop striking him. The Empress, heartbroken, quietly wept before gently bending down to hold him. "Right now, I have no one but you, my child," she said softly. Hearing her words, the crown prince whispered, "I'm sorry, mother." The scene shifted to the royal court, where the emperor sat with an imposing presence, looking down at the gathered officials. He turned to one eunuch and ordered, "Bring me the documents the crown prince asked you to prepare." The eunuchs quickly complied. "Yes, your majesty." Moments later, the eunuch presented a stack of documents. After reviewing them, the emperor's expression darkened. "The smallest tribute they demand is worth 2 months of our annual treasury, and the largest can reach up to 5 months. If we include the tribute from smaller villages, the total could equal almost an entire year's worth of resources." He held up the records and challenged, "Do you see this, ministers? Here is the list of tributes sent to the Ming Empire year after year. What do you have to say about this?" Silence hung in the air. The emperor, enraged, slammed his fist against the chair. Why is there no response? Even the crown prince, a mere child, has considered this, yet none of you have thought to act. The ministers bowed their heads, speaking in unison. "We apologize, your majesty." The emperor's anger flared again. "Choose the leader of the envoy and their assistant within 2 hours, or I will charge you all with treason." The ministers, their voices shaky, replied, "Thank you, your majesty, for your grace." That night, as the emperor gazed at the moon, the empress's voice broke the silence. "Your majesty?" He turned and asked, "Is something troubling you, empress?" She hesitated before speaking. "I stepped out for some fresh air as I couldn't sleep." "But your majesty, why did you punish the crown prince so harshly today? It seemed more severe than usual." The emperor paused before responding. "The crown prince is a clever child, but sometimes he becomes too absorbed in his own intelligence. Today, he faced opposition from the ministers, and that led to this outcome. A tree that grows too straight can easily break if it lacks support. Without the minister's trust, how can he properly care for the people?" The empress listened in silence, watching him. The emperor continued, "I believe the crown prince has the qualities of a sage. From now on, I will guide him to ensure he follows the right path." The empress smiled softly, though she didn't fully understand his reasoning. "I may not completely grasp your deeper intentions, but if this is your goal, I have no other wish." After the harsh punishment, the emperor immediately ordered the ministers to select the envoy leader and assistant. Although the crown prince's actions had been extreme, he had spoken no falsehoods. His methods, however, had surpassed the emperor's patience, and for that, he was punished. The crown prince rested his head on his hand, exhaling repeatedly. He watched his younger brothers playing in the courtyard. His gaze lingered on the one closest in age to him, a boy whose future would shape the fate of the kingdom. That child, laughing and darting around without a care, was none other than you, his younger brother. But you was no ordinary prince. In the years ahead, this seemingly carefree boy would unleash a storm of bloodshed within these very palace walls. He was destined to become the 17th ruler of Yoshin, King Seijo. If history unfolded as Jinho remembered, you would orchestrate the downfall of the current King Mong. Then, he would aid Mong's nephew, King Danjeng, in ascending the throne. However, Yu's ambition wouldn't end there. He would rally the Gai Yu Jiang faction, staging a rebellion that would crush all opposition. Even his own brother, Grand Prince Anian, wouldn't escape his grasp, poisoned to secure Yu's reign. The Gai Yu Jiang uprising was no minor skirmish. It was a full-scale coup, a brutal purge that redefined the kingdom's power structure in 1453. Jinho could still recall his teacher's words about Prince Swan. A man who had forsaken both his younger and older siblings, turned against his grandfather and father, and cast an ominous shadow over the once prosperous Joseon dynasty. Historians condemned Swan as a tyrant. And now, as Jinho stared at his innocent-looking brother, dread settled deep in his chest. That child would one day become a monster. Jinho clenched his fists. He couldn't stand idly by and watch history repeat itself. He had to act before Yu's ambitions took root. A sudden thought flickered in his mind, curling his lips into a smirk. Yes, that was the answer. The best way to reshape someone's fate was through guidance. With newfound determination, he strode toward his brothers, calling out, "Yu, good morning." The two younger princes, Yu and Ong, whose real names were Swang and Anand, halted their game and turned to him, bowing politely. "Good morning, elder brother." Jinho smiled warmly. "You both seem to be enjoying yourselves." Then, Turning to you, he asked, "Your writing lesson is soon, isn't it? Why don't we study together today?" You blinked, caught off guard. "What?" Jinho hadn't expected him to question it, and stumbled over his words. "Why? I just want to see how you're progressing." But beneath the surface, his thoughts ran deeper. "You'll serve under me one day. You won't have the luxury to slack off." Yu's expression darkened with suspicion. He hesitated, then shook his head. "I'll study on my own." Without waiting for a reply, Yu grabbed Aang's hand and pulled him away. "Let's go. We're disturbing our brother." Though his voice remained neutral, there was a flicker of irritation in his eyes. As the day wore on, the palace bustled with its usual routines. That evening, Yu eagerly rushed toward the dining hall, his small feet pattering against the polished floors. A maid trailed behind him, sighing, "Young master, slow down, you'll trip." As he neared the hall, hushed voices from a nearby corridor caught his attention. He stopped abruptly, pressing himself against the wall to eavesdrop. "His Highness, the Crown Prince, is truly exceptional," one servant murmured in admiration. "Despite his youth, he's already well-versed in literature and governance." "Indeed," another agreed. "A prodigy born to lead." You perked up, expecting to hear his name next. But as the conversation continued, his excitement faded. "Well, the second prince is competent, but compared to the Crown Prince, they were born to be compared," the first servant sighed. A sharp pang shot through Yu's chest. His fingers curled into fists behind him. His maid noticed his expression and stormed toward the gossiping servants. "How dare you speak so carelessly," she snapped. The startled maids dropped to their knees. "We deserve punishment." Before his maid could drag them away for discipline, Yu held up a hand. "Let it go," he said coolly. "It doesn't matter." On the surface, he seemed unbothered, but deep inside, an unsettling question gnawed at him. Why am I always second? A few days later, Jinho gathered his younger brothers in his chambers, determined to strengthen their bond. He proudly held up 2 handmade flashcards, grinning. "Look, this is how this character is written. It represents the sky and the earth." Gahan's eyes widened with delight. "Wow, did you make these, brother?" Jinho puffed out his chest. "Of course. Well, I had the palace eunuch's help. These flashcards were part of a strategy, a way to spend time with his brothers while steering you toward a different path. With these, I'll make sure learning is enjoyable. He won't even realize I'm molding him." He turned to Yu. "Come have a look." But Yu, unimpressed, shook his head. "I already have a tutor. I don't need them." Jinho's smile froze. His disinterest stung more than expected. Gahan, looking perplexed, asked, "Wouldn't it be more enjoyable if we studied together?" But before he could finish, Yu abruptly cut him off. "I can handle it myself," he snapped, turning away coldly. He added, "Please don't call me for things like this again." His sudden reaction left both startled and confused. The following day, Yu sat in the courtyard, absorbed in his studies with his tutor. Concealed behind the bushes nearby, Jinho crouched low, quietly observing. "This kid is harder to figure out than I expected. I need to watch him closely every day," he thought. The tutor, with a warm smile, asked, "Do you find this section difficult?" Yu returned the smile and replied, "Not at all. Your teaching is very clear, so I understand it easily." His respectful and composed demeanor took Jinho by surprise. "What's this? He's much nicer than I thought. Is he only difficult when dealing with me?" That's all for today. For the next part, make sure to subscribe my channel Fire Recap. And you don't forget to share and like the video. I am out.